Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick from Blind, and today we are going to introduce you to Lynne Oldham, who's the Chief People Officer at Stash. She leads talent acquisition, development, and retention efforts through building an inclusive remote first hybrid organization. Lynne joined Stash as a talent management and development leader with 20 years of experience in HR leadership and key talent acquisition. Before Stash, she was Zoom's chief people officer, joining the company before its IPO and navigating continued business scaling, employee engagement, and safeguarding culture through unprecedented times. Stash is an investing app dedicated to empowering people to invest and build better lives. Stash's plans unlock access to a suite of simple, automated solutions designed to help people find security and peace of mind through investing. Thanks for coming on the show, Lynne.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Lynne, you've been doing HR for a while now. What brought you into it? Like, what was the thing that made you say, "Hey, I'm going to do this"?
Well, I took a rather circuitous route into HR because, back in the day, I was the first in my family to go to college. And my parents didn't know jack about going to college. My mother was suggesting nursing. Nursing's a great career. You can get in and out, have a family, you can wear uniforms, you can have nice clothes outside of work. She made the arguments that she knew to make, and I got into nursing school, and about 4 semesters in is when you start giving each other injection shots, and my hand shook like crazy. I didn't like it. I wanted to help people, but not through a nursing career. And I learned that lesson hard when I was in the VA hospital giving a pre-op shot to a gentleman who let out a blood-curdling scream. And that was the end of my career.
That was your career. It was over, just like that.
I switched to business administration, finance, which when I was young, that was what I loved. And I just didn't know enough to follow what I loved, right? So I ended up with my degree in business administration, finance. And my first job was in this little company off the New York Thruway, who said, "We love the fact that you have this degree." And I had been working in a hospital while I was finishing my degree. They liked the combination of the two. My first job, I paid pharmacy claims for retirees for this little company.
That's such a niche kind of thing, right? That's so.
Well, and then I've done every job across the spectrum since then. The only thing I haven't done job-wise in HR is be a recruiter, and I do enough recruiting for myself and my teams that I feel like I can check that box too.
So, how did you make the journey from that company from the New York Thruway into big tech and the startup life?
Somebody coined this term for me. They called me an HR unicorn because I didn't stay put in one industry. Not only did I move into bigger roles, but I also changed industries. I've been in banking, I've been in berries, I've been in oil and gas, I've been in telecom, I've been in publishing, and that's not the last of the list. It's a long list.
Wait, did you say berries?
Berries. Yeah.
Okay. So the berries business?
I was the chief people officer for Driscoll's. You know Driscoll's. That's a household. Yeah.
Everyone knows.
Wait,
Yeah.
embarrassed.
There you go.
Was
You
this
know. I was their chief people officer for a while on the West Coast in Watsonville, California.
so? Wait, did you kind of keep moving, to different
Yeah.
locations as well as moving jobs?
Oh, not only did I move industry, but I've moved around the US and continents. I've worked in Europe, I've worked in the UK, all sounding very glamorous, but all the most stretch I've ever felt in my career when I had to move house, move my family, do a totally different job in a totally different work environment. A lot of stretch happened during those cycles, and I'm thankful for all of it. It's all been really great for me.
We don't talk about this enough, but how was it for the family when you're moving all over the place? How did they take it? Did they feel like, "Oh no, we're moving it," or did they say, "Oh, this is cool, we're going to go
Oh
to a new
no,
place"?
all the this is cool kind of things. Like I was the one going to work when I was in Paris. I worked right by the opera. So I'd walk to the opera. I'd go for 9. And contrary to popular belief, at least in the bank I worked in, the French worked fairly long hours. So I wouldn't be walking home till 8, 8:30 at night. Meanwhile, they were all out enjoying the city. They benefited greatly from my my abroad stints. Yes. So did I.
So you get along very well with Rick because he loves traveling also. So you two are kindred spirits. He loves every way he can go find a place to travel.
I love it.
Despite my wanderlust, admittedly, went to school in Berkeley, born and raised in San Francisco. I still live and work in San Francisco, and I haven't had the chance to move out of the Bay Area bubble, so to speak. What gave you the courage when these opportunities presented themselves to not only move job functions to get into HR, but also switch industries, switch cities, switch countries, switch functions? It's quite a lot.
Well, at the time, I was working for a French company. And in French companies, you have a career for life. That's just how they think about things. It's not the same as here in the US. When I was working for an expat who was leading the HR function at the bank in New York, he said to me, I want you to be me when I'm ready to go to my next assignment. He worked in the bank for 30 years, had 10 different jobs. He said, but you can't do that unless they know you, they meaning the head office. So I'd love you to go do this. And he literally told me on a Friday, could you tell me by Monday whether you want to do this or not? We had to make a mad scramble and a lot of decisions and a lot of pros and cons lists that weekend. But we said yes. I said yes. Then for the entire summer, I did not know what I was going to do. They hadn't defined the role yet. I arrived October 1st of 2006 to the French office to work for someone totally different than I had been working for, and to find out that they wanted me to develop the program that would identify top talent and develop them across the globe. I was in a little bit of shock because to that point in my career, I had taken the path of what I'll call back office HR, benefits, payroll, HRIS, moving people around the world, more the tactical part of that, not the strategic part of that. And they were asking me to do a very strategic thing, which was a game changer for me. And I did it all taking a lot of risk. I don't know where that came from, Rick. I can't even explain it to you. It just came out of me somehow, but I just trusted the person who was talking to me in New York, Michel Magny, who is just passed this last year. And he was just such an advocate and such a great individual. I trusted him and I landed very nicely and I enjoyed my work. I traveled around the globe, making sure that what we were defining top talent was the same thing in Germany and Japan. The bank I was with was in 85 countries. So we had to make sure we were speaking a global universal language. It was a trip.
So a couple of takeaways I'm getting is that one is that it seems like you have to take risks and go out of your comfort zone, because you could have easily said, I'm just going to stay here in New Jersey or wherever and be comfortable, but you push yourself out to do that. And then also, it seems like you found a great mentor who looked after you to really keep an eye on you and help promote your career. Are there other things too you've noticed in your journey as a career, as an HR professional that could extend to other people, like how they could kind of navigate their career similar to what you're doing and how you were able to be successful?
I think something in what we talked about earlier around this idea of multiple industries, I never took no for an answer, Jack, and I got a lot of no's, right? Because when you talk to agencies, and no shade to agencies, but they like to fill their roles. If they get a role from a company and it's a retail company, they're looking for retail HR people because they think they have to. They think that's the quicker way to a sale. So I never took no for an answer and I found my own ways in. My time at Zoom, I met someone who introduced me to their CFO. I had lunch with her and then the rest is history. I just paved my own path and never really took no for an answer.
When you say don't not take no for an answer, how do you do it? Because like a lot of times, like how do you
Yeah.
say no to your boss or your
Let me tell you, this is a really great example. This is in looking for another role. I wanted this role with a telecom company. It was so perfect for me. It was a little bit of expansion for me. And the agency told me, no, we're not putting your resume forward. I called the company. I asked who the head of HR was. I asked, don't laugh at me, what her fax number was, because there's
yeah.
no such thing as a fax anymore, right? Turns out the fax was on the back credenza of her office. I faxed her a note. She called the agency. He didn't really want to speak to me for a while, but she said, why aren't you showing me Lynne Oldham? And the rest is history. But the bottom line is, I just keep pushing. I'm not pushy, but I keep pushing.
That's a bold move because they could easily be like, who is this woman who's trying to push her way into here? You know?
Right, that's right. But it worked. I like the words polite and persistent.
But I think
So
that's good advice, right? Because I think too often it's very easy for our brain to kind of wander and think, well, if I do this, they're going to say no. So I'm just going to save everyone some time and just not do it or not ask or not tell people how I feel about wanting a certain thing or trying to accomplish a certain goal. But, if you just put it out there, and I don't want to seem too cheesy, but you give yourself that opportunity, right? Where, sure, if someone says no, then that's fine and we'll learn from it and go on. But if they
Because I
say
think
yes, then
Rick, I think what we do is we create stories in our head as to why we haven't heard from them, why,
right.
and it isn't the truth, right? It's just that we're all going a million different directions, and maybe it's taken an extra couple of days to get you on the interview docket, et cetera. So I don't think it's terrible to be
polite but persistent.
politely persistent.
One of the cool things or crazy things is when you went to Zoom, right? Did you start just when the pandemic hit?
I had two major events there. I started in January of 19, and we went public April of 19. So I took them up and through their IPO. And then the pandemic happened. And that was a challenging time because really, I mean, for everybody, but what Zoom was, there were two, I'll call it dual challenges. The first challenge was around this idea of scaling the business for the incredible demand that happened during the pandemic. I was employee 1384 in January of 2019. By the time I left, in January of 22, we had about 8,000 employees. That growth came between March of 20 and 2021. There were times, I call it organized bedlam, when we were hiring and onboarding 200 plus employees per month. The second part of that challenge was taking care of our own employees, because while we were making sure Zoom was on for everyone, we were also having to make sure that our employees were just
safe and
safe, ensure their well-being. You think Zoom was a company that was remote before? No, we were 85% of us were in an office. So we all had to go home too and deal with the pandemic while we were growing and firing on all cylinders. We did a lot of interesting things during that time, and we added some very innovative mental health benefits that really did do the trick for our employees. We had a happy crew with 100 employees who were all embedded in the business, who were brought on to really help with the culture. But during the pandemic, they ramped up. It was quite the ride.
How did you do 200 a month, especially under the circumstances where some people are remote and then maybe, they don't know what's going on. They're freaked out.
Yeah, well, add to that the idea we never used agencies. We had to ramp our own team up to a certain size to be able to even do those numbers, right? And the average recruiter, especially the tech side, the engineering side, is only going to land about 8 employees in a quarter, right? That's the accepted standard. So I had to have quite a few recruiters, but it was an unprecedented time, and it really did lead us to being more innovative in how we thought about things. And that's what made it an exciting time albeit stressful, for the HR team because we had to think about things that were going to take us to the next level as opposed to just cranking out the bodies to come and do the work.
I want to zoom in there, right? Because there's some uncertainty, and looking back, a lot of the things that has changed in the last 3, 4 years because of the pandemic, we can kind of say, like, oh, yeah, of course, Zoom was at the heart of it, right? The company, the product, just everything now, or might even seem so obvious. But at the time when you were living it, that organized bedlam, how did you get the buy in when people were confused? They might have been scared, and you were proposing entirely new things and new means of thinking, right?
Yeah.
What was that like?
I had a particularly good leadership team that trusted deliver on the things that we needed to do as a company. I didn't have a lot of pushback. We were moving so fast and furiously, and we knew what the issues. Remember, it wasn't just the pandemic. George Floyd was happening. Me Too had just happened. I mean, there were so many things that were contributing to this mental burden for employees, and we were living in different times, right? The dollars were flowing too, and now HR has to do things more on a shoestring. I think the combination of the times we were in, both the economic and cultural, really did make it easier. I wouldn't say easy, but easier for me to move things forward that were smart and helpful to our workforce.
Human resources. I think most people, whether employees or job seekers, they really don't know how to view them. Like, are they the enemy? Are they like the mouthpiece of the leadership? Are they here to help people? What's your take? And especially now, like how's the vibe for HR? Are people generally happy in these positions?
I saw a lot of friends and acquaintances leave the field post pandemic. They really got burned out. I like to say I'm the sort of the Switzerland. I'm the middle ground between leadership and the employees. I'm working for the business, but I'm also working for the employees. And I've got to do that delicate dance all the time because I think they're one and the same is what I'd like to say, because I think our employees, if they're thriving, if they're doing well, whether that's mental, physical, financially, we're going to be better off as a company. We're going to be more productive, and we'll just all do better, right? I like to say, like, through the people lens, I make the business better. And that's all through facilitation, right? And that's maybe why it's been tough with pandemic, and then especially in tech, all the layoffs, for some of the folks in my role to really continue on and not need a break.
If you'll allow me to poke at this for a little bit, you worked at Zoom. You mentioned the change of the vibe within the tech industry. There are these layoffs. How did you feel when you saw some CEOs actually conducting layoffs, mass layoffs over Zoom? What was that shift like for you as HR executive, someone at Zoom with that, product company experience, to see the product being used that way by basically your peers?
In a remote environment, the only way you can do things sometimes is the way we're doing them today, right?
Right.
I just believe in a higher touch. And that doesn't mean in person. It just means that I want to talk to every individual on the day of. I know volume sometimes doesn't allow that, and maybe that's why that had to be done that way. But in the case of Stash, where I am, we actually had some layoffs ourselves, and we personally handled those one by one mass conversations. And that's just my philosophy. I don't feel like anybody, especially on the worst day, wants to be talked to with an audience, right? Zoom enabled many things. Unfortunately, that was one of them. But in a remote or hybrid world, we have to rely on tools like this. But at the same time, we can't take away the empathy and the personalness of it. Even though it's not a personal decision, you have to deal with folks with empathy and get on a personal level with them.
I'm really glad you mentioned about empathy, because when you and I maybe first started working, you would have conversations, you would speak to people. And now I don't understand how it changed so much, where someone will go on an interview and another interview and another interview and another interview, and then just get ghosted.
Yeah.
It just seems so cold. Or you'll be brought in for a PIP, for performance improvement plan, and now you're sweating bullets and you're, oh my God, am I going to lose my job? It just doesn't seem the same that it used to be. I don't mean to be that old cranky man, like, ah, it's not like it used to be. But it kind of feels like back then there was a little bit more empathy and working with candidates and your, employees. Now it just, tell me if I'm wrong. Like it just seems colder.
I
My,
think it feels colder
yeah.
because we're doing it over this, right?
Mm,
But, back in the dinosaur age when I started, I don't know that it was any less problematic for the
right.
individual on the other end of that. It's just that you were sitting in front of someone and you felt a little differently. I think it's all about the company and the culture. Like I don't PIPs, I mean, everybody does them, yes, but I'm a fan of like continuous conversation. Let's give feedback in a contemporaneous way. Let's not wait and do like some drastic PIP. And if we do a PIP, let's make it achievable. Let's check in with the person on a regular. Let's not just say 30 days or you're out of here and wait till the 29th day, right? So
Exactly.
there's a way to do it. And I think the people who do it well, even if you're in the other end of it, you feel like you were treated fairly. And that's what I think this is all about, is making sure people feel like they're treated fairly. And it's not that hard.
So why do you think it happens though? Is it just you get into routine and everyone else is doing it, so you do it and you
I
just get
think
complacent?
I think that during the crazy times when money was flowing from all our venture friends, we were promoting people at a clip that we couldn't even support. And I'm just using the we as a collective we, especially in the tech space. If you look across all those first time managers, we then didn't take the time and to help them be the best they could be, right? Because who's the first HR manager? It's the line leader. It's not me. So if we're not teaching them that part of the job and we're promoting them sort of at that clip without giving them that proper education, they're a little lost, right? And they don't know how often they should be talking to people, how they should be managing performance. We missed some steps in there. We were all growing so fast and so furiously that we were promoting people and not giving them what they needed to do the job the best way they could. And I think we're all collectively, again, I'm going to use we because I talk to a lot of my peers, we're all trying to remedy that right now by giving the folks who found themselves in that position some more attention, management 101, 102, 103, really trying to bring them along the spectrum.
That makes so much sense because it's putting into perspective. And nowadays, it seems like these companies are tightening the belts, cutting costs, almost making amends for like, we've got drunk with all the venture capital money, as you were saying, and hiring and promoting and letting people have a day in the life videos on TikTok. And now it's like bringing it back, not
Yeah.
because we're being mean, but now we got to just we don't have free flowing money. We got to be more cautious.
That's right.
And now that's why you get how it's changing.
Yeah, and we owe it to them, right? Again, since they're the first HR manager, I think it's really critical that we impart on them the skills, because people, what do they leave? They leave managers, not companies. So we want to make sure they're doing the best job that they can.
I love that approach because oftentimes a lot of these stereotypes that we have about HR, they come from this defensiveness that like HR professionals might have to put on because, they're in an awful position too, right? Where they have to figure out things on the fly just as employees themselves. I think sometimes we often forget that and have this, us versus them mentality. They're also employees just like us. So, it stinks to fire people or lay people off, right? Like I've done it not as an HR person, but as a manager.
Yeah.
And you feel awful even when, someone did something wrong.
Yes. Stash. It's very purpose-driven company. And I didn't find purpose-driven work till my 80s. And then once I did, I was in love. I'd have to say like laying off people is like the worst days I've ever had, even in this really great company where everyone is driven by our mission. Those days suck. And they suck for me as bad as they suck for the manager, as bad as they suck for the person on the other end. I have
Is that an official HR term?
Yeah.
Sucks. Yeah. Okay.
I have teared up during those. I really have a hard time with my emotions on those days. I totally agree with you. It is not the best look. And thankfully, I think a lot of that hopefully is behind us. Companies are finally getting their expenses in line and they're feeling a little bit better about things.
Do you have any advice for your peers at these other companies to kind of rebuild that reputation in terms of bridging that gap, getting over that us versus them mentality, these tropes that we often hear like HR is not your friend, don't trust HR? What advice do you have for both professionals or the HR side to get over that hurdle?
You've just got to be a really good listener. You have to be really curious. You have to look at and hear what your employees are saying, what they want, either through stay interviews, exit interviews, surveys, whatever modality you use to listen. And then you have to deliver. If you hear it's financial well being, you have to deliver. If you hear that it's lack of career trajectory, you've got to think about how to do that in a way that gets people re-engaged and motivated. It's not hard to just listen and think about ways, what either tried and true or innovative solutions that are out there to put in place to get people excited. You're not only listening, but you're hearing them. It's like going back to the basics. It's really just a mindset.
Mhm.
So, and I think employees, they're not suffering in silence anymore. They're telling us what they need, right? And that's why all the news is about this. So there's definitely a gap that we have to think about, just like we thought about mental well-being during the pandemic. And it's up to us, really, as employers, to really rethink the paradigm.
I appreciate that look, and I'm struck by your approach throughout your career in terms of empathy and thinking about the other person, because I think that is a good reminder, and I think we'd all be a lot better if we also took that approach. So thank you, Lynn.
In life and in work. Yeah.
Excellent.
Certainly.
Well, thank you so much. This was great.
That's it for The Blind Ambition. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and a review. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.